We were discussing the limits on lines of technological development that could create more jobs here, and we were on limits on computer technology.
Doesn't Moore's law offer hope that computers will continue to become cheaper and more powerful? Can that not create more jobs?
Moore's law that the number of logic gates that can be cheaply put on a chip doubles about every 2 years is not a law of physics, only an observation of a trend, but one that is even now approaching physical limits. After that it will be a leap into quantum computing, but we do not yet know what we can achieve there. However, while more powerful and cheaper computers can create some jobs for a while, they can also displace human workers. We have mechanized much of mining, agriculture, manufacturing, and now office work. Technological obsolescence of human labor is a real problem. The great strides ahead of us seem to be in nanotechnology and robotics.
Will those not create many new jobs here?
They will create a few high-tech jobs, but probably not for all the laid-off factory, office, and government workers.
Will that not at least bring more money and jobs into the U.S. from exports?
There is good news and bad news. The good news is that all those offshore jobs are coming back. The bad news is that when they do, they will be done by machines.
You've got to be shitting me.
Those who do not own machines may have to make a living selling insurance to one another.
Come on. There have to be a lot of jobs that can only be done here, and that only humans can do.
Of course there are, and we need to do what we can to create them. But most of the jobs we can create, going forward, are not semi-skilled or blue-collar jobs. Workers in other countries can beat us on those jobs, except for those that can only be done here.
So if there are too many high-priced homes, is there at least a market for low-cost homes that can employ workers here?
Yes. We are very close to full automation of the construction of manufactured housing. It will soon be possible to deliver and install a complete house for a fraction of the cost today. A couple of men will be able to set one up, fasten together the major pieces, and connect the utilities, all in one day. But that won't replace all the jobs lost for carpenters, plumbers, and electricians.
What about all the agricultural work being done by foreign workers?
Just as we have mechanized the harvesting of grains, so work is being done on mechanical planters and harvesters of all the other agricultural products that now use manual labor. The machines are still too expensive, but computer technology will soon make them true robots capable of subtle judgment and dexterity, and bring down their costs to less than hiring human labor, even if the humans are willing to work for free.
What about mining?
I think you already know the answer to that. Much of the work of mining is now being done by boring machines and conveyors. Human workers mainly support the machines. But we will soon see robots that can do that better, at lower cost, and without risk to human life. The time is near when no human need set foot in any mine. Everything will be controlled from a console on the surface. Design work is already being done on totally automated oil and gas drilling rigs. That will also greatly reduce the costs of exploratory drilling, and of extraction.
Are you not just making the same kind of predictions made in science fiction and popular science magazines for 80 years, of things that were always just around the corner? Where are flying cars?
Yes, but many of them have materialized, and others are either in the prototype stage, or there are active R&D programs to develop them, with promising early results.
But are not most of these developments the result of government spending on military and space programs? I thought we needed to cut government spending.
We need to cut government spending on things that do not contribute to productivity. It is said by some that government spending, especially for entitlements, only goes to consumption and not to production, but that is not quite correct. Too much does, but some government spending is productive.
How can we tell the difference?
It is also sometimes said that government spending yields public goods which do not have a measurable return on investment, but there is a way to measure such investment, by the increase of production that is taxable. Spending that brings in more taxes than the amount spent, at a competitive rate of return, may be justified. However, it usually takes more than 30 years for such government investment to pay off. Government can do a lot of damage to the economy in the short term, but it can take 2 generations for wise spending to bear fruit. Most private investment is not that patient.
So government spending to create jobs in the short term is unwise?
Yes, if that is all it does. The private sector is generally better at creating jobs that pay off in the short or medium term, to produce things that people are willing and able to buy in the next few years. Government spending should generally not be used for that.
Okay, so on that reckoning, which government spending programs should continue, and which should be cut back?
If you were asking me that question 30 years ago, I would say it is wise to invest in education and health care for the young, who have enough working life ahead of them to pay back the investment in taxes, but not in those who cannot. Older people need to provide for their own old age through wise investment.
But I am asking you now.
Yes, and now it is too late to continue even much of the wise government spending, if we are to avoid global catastrophe. We have been spending too much unwisely for too long, and the future will suffer for that. It may take a century to recover from the foolishness of the last 3 generations.
Is there not some government spending we need to continue even in this crisis?
Yes, but most of that is for long-term basic and applied research and development, and that is the kind of spending that is politically the most likely to be cut first. Too many people are willing to eat our seed corn.
Is not much of the government money for R&D wasted?
Yes, but not as much as many people think. However, it is less likely to be wasted if it is focused on specific missions. Most of our economic growth for the last 30 years was made possible from spin-offs from R&D for military and space programs from before 1970, mainly in microelectronics. Much of the growth we can expect in the near or mid-term is from recent R&D on robotics, but most of that is probably still more than a decade away, not soon enough to get us out of our present crisis. Remember, the private sector here could use the $1.5 trillion it is sitting on to create 15 million jobs and pay the salaries for the first year. That is enough to wipe out unemployment. And if that $2.5 trillion held abroad were brought back, it could pay the salaries of those workers for another 3 years. The fact that most of the many companies holding that cash are not using it to create jobs here is a strong argument that doing so would not be a wise investment for them.
Would it not be rational for them to do just that, because those workers would stimulate economic growth and demand for things they might make?
That might be collectively rational for them, if they all did it at once and were willing to wait long enough for the profits. But in most cases it is not rational for them separately, especially when they answer to investors that demand profits on the next quarterly report.
So is there anything we can do to make it rational for them separately?
The main thing we can do is to reduce the costs and risks of hiring new workers. Much of that $40,000 startup cost to hire a new worker is for capital investment that can only be reduced so much, but perhaps a fourth of it comes from government taxation and regulation that could be reduced. That has to be done carefully. A tax credit for new hires is too likely to result in layoffs of new hires after the company gets the tax credit, and then hires someone else to get the credit. Accelerated depreciation on capital for new hires might work better, but it is difficult to separate that capital from other capital. The best solution is likely to be to eliminate the corporate income tax altogether, although that is not popular.
Is not the income tax and Social Security also a burden on hiring?
Yes, and a rational tax policy would replace the income tax on individuals with a purchase tax on purchases made to produce something. That could include purchases of labor. But if we want to encourage employment, it should not include that.
How is that different from a sales tax or a value-added tax?
A purchase tax is an excise tax paid by the purchaser on the purchases it makes to produce something for sale. The ultimate consumer would not have to pay it, but it would be a cost of production that would be passed on in higher prices. To avoid putting companies here at a disadvantage in international trade, we would want to eliminate the corporate income tax. That would tend to reduce consumption and increase investment.
If we made these changes in taxes and regulation today, how long would it take to create more jobs here?
Some jobs might be created immediately, but enough jobs to eliminate most unemployment will not come as long as companies here are afraid the debt crisis will trigger economic collapse. Most of the jobs will not be created until after the spending and borrowing is reduced, and not just by government. The private sector and consumers are also overextended. Much of that debt can never be paid back and will have to be written down. That will hurt most investors but also create new opportunities. It will be painful and unpopular, but we have to do it.